Welcome everyone. Welcome to The Crowned Life. And today we're going to talk about why forgiveness never seems to work with narcissists and what does. So if you are interested in this topic, we're going to cover, why it doesn't work and why we keep doing it anyway. And we're going to redefine forgiveness in a more healthy context. And we're also going to look into the role that forgiveness plays in our own personal healing, and then we're going to talk about what really works. So stay tuned. All right, so let's start off with, why narcissists get away with so much. Because people forgive them of so much. Let them get away with all kinds of things, and you might be one of those people who has forgiven to a fault. You might be a hyper forgiver. And unfortunately, hyper forgivers, what they do is they forgive indiscriminately. We're going to talk more about that later as to why people do that. But it is a good part of you. Unfortunately, it is something that is going to make you more vulnerable to narcissists. And I will explain why as well as we get later into this video. But the issue with narcissists is that they are going to be drawn to people who have a conscience, and they're going to play upon that conscience even though they lack one. And this is how they use something really good against you. For those of you who don't know, I am the author of a book on healing from narcissistic abuse, and I talk about this. I talk about how narcissists use your conscience against you, even though they lack one and they know it, okay? I talk more about that in the book, but more specific about this video, I want to say that if you are a hyper forgiver, or you're somebody basically who forgives indiscriminately, what unfortunately happens is forgivers become enablers of narcissists. And that's why they love to surround themselves with people who are so forgiving and so, conscious, about, being a good person and being the bigger person and, setting the example and that kind of thing. And unfortunately, what they do with this forgiveness is they use it as a perpetual get out of jail for free card to perpetually avoid reality and evade accountability and responsibility. It's a way also for them to shift the response ability to other people by, like, for example, putting it upon you to fix and heal the relationship regardless of their deservingness. And so when the narcissist recognizes you as an enabler in their life through your endless forgiveness, and despite, their repeated irresponsible action, then they're going to hang on to this forgiver indefinitely. And that then keeps you stuck in the relationship indefinitely. And think about this. Why? Why would this keep you stuck? Why would this keep you in the relationship? Well, why not? I mean, your enabling is working for them. It works for them. So they're going to keep working it to their advantage. You've got to realize that forgiveness for a narcissist reinforces and validates their behavior. They're getting, what they want out of the arrangement. They're getting to not change their behavior, and they get, to get what they're getting out of the behavior regardless of the consequences to themselves and other people. Here's the problem, is that narcissists deep down feel entitled to forgiveness. They're not humbled by it. Most people, when they ask for forgiveness and it's given to them, they really are humbled by it because they see it as a second chance and they don't want to screw this up, okay? Narcissists, on the other hand, they're just not humbled by it. They don't see it as a second chance. They see it as, oh man, it worked, And there's also, like I said, this sense of entitlement. They surround themselves with people who let them do what they want to do without the consequences. And they surround themselves with people who give them what they want without merit. They don't want to be around people who hold them to a higher standard. And the moment that you stop forgiving, that's when the gaslighting starts. And for those of you who don't know, I talk about gaslighting in my book. But basically, in a nutshell, if you're not familiar with that term, it is a method by which the narcissist likes to mentally manipulate you, emotionally manipulate you into getting you to question yourself. It's a head game, okay? To get the spotlight off of them, to turn the tables on you and get you, defending yourself and explaining yourself and proving yourself, and get the focus off of them. And so you'll hear things like, on the forgiveness note with the gaslighting, you'll hear things like, I thought you said you loved me. What's wrong with you? Family should always stick together. We're family. If you come from a religious background, let's say you're a Christian, that could be used against you, and they could say things like, I thought you said you were a Christian. Hypocrite. I can't believe you call yourself a Christian. They might even go enlist some people down at the church, a pastor or something, to come talk to you about forgiveness and, getting a little sermon about that. So, be ready for the gaslighting when you decide that you're no longer gonna, keep forgiving because it's not getting anybody anywhere worth going. Okay. So why do you do it? Why do you keep forgiving this person? Or why have you continued to forgive this person, even though it's clearly not working out? You're not getting what you want or need out of the arrangement. Well, sometimes, I think a lot of times for people, it's just easier to call it a misunderstanding. Let's just sweep it under the rug. Right? I mean, let's say it's, on Christmas Day or over, Thanksgiving meal. It's like, well, do I really want to make this a big to-do, or do we just want to let this go because we only get together once a year and I don't want to ruin the holidays, or, whatever. Or maybe it's an everyday thing and you just let it go every day, day after day after day, because there's a fear of consequences for not forgiving. There might be codependency. There might be dependency issues, financial dependency issues, where you're afraid, like, oh my God, if I rock the boat with this person, how am I going to pay my bills? Where am I going to live? Am I going to have to call the cops because this person flies off in a narcissistic rage? How much drama am I going to have to deal with for, calling a duck? And another possible reason is future faking, which, by the way, I think is a term. I don't know who coined that phrase, but I think it's brilliant. And I first heard it from Dr. Romani. And if you haven't heard her or, seen her on YouTube, she's got plenty of resources for narcissism. And I do have to, give a hat tip to her because she's brilliant. I watch a lot of her videos myself. And I think I first heard her say future faking. So I don't know who coined the term, but I first heard it from her. And she is a brilliant source. So, but, this is basically where the narcissist will, promise that they're going to change, or maybe you're making believe in your own mind that eventually they're going to change. But I do talk in my book about the fake epiphanies and the fake recoveries that usually only last maybe up to 6 months, and then then the mask falls off again, and it's relapse time, and you go through this cycle every 6 months of, getting violated, forgiving, because they relapse. And yeah, they might put up a good front. For some of you, you did have those tough conversations. You did give consequences, and they earn back your trust. And as soon as they earn back your trust, they violate it again, because it's all an act. It's all about faking whether they're just making promises of changing or they're actually acting like they're changed and they're recovered. They're talking a good talk, they're putting on a good show, but they can't maintain over the long term beyond 6 months because it's all a facade that they're erecting and they're expecting everybody else to erect in their lives to keep the dream alive. There's no real substance to it. And so some of you, again, might have stayed in this looping pattern of relentless, perpetual forgiveness because they keep relapsing, and then pulling you back in every time. Some of you also, maybe you've gotten smart by now to the game. You know it's all a front, and any change that they put on is for a limited time, right? You figured this out, and you're just at a place right now where you're trying to set a good example and be the bigger person. Maybe because you've got family, maybe there's children, and I talk about that in my book as well, because I definitely understand that. I've went through similar dynamics, being the mother of 3 myself. That backfired on me. I'm not going to talk about that in this video, but if you want to know more about it, like I said, it's in my book, which, side note, is available, for those of you who don't know, is available on Kindle and ebook. It's on Amazon in print, and it's on Audible in audio format, however you like it. It's also on Vimeo, by the way, in video format. But this trying to be, the bigger person and set a good example keeps you in this looping pattern of perpetual forgiving and backsliding and, repeated betrayal and all of that. Others of you, it's part of your religious and spiritual beliefs, and I'm going to talk more about that later, because coming from a Christian background myself, I can definitely speak to that storyline. Finally, and I think this is really one of the most common, it's the way you were raised. Okay, the childhood programming, and I've got an entire chapter in my book. I believe it's chapter 3 is devoted to the childhood programming. Many of us who engage in this, we were brought up in homes with childhood emotional neglect. Many of us came from narcissistic family dynamics where forgiveness was a poor coping mechanism in dealing with a family member's unchanged toxic behavior. It's just a way of saying, well, they didn't mean it. Oh, they're just having a bad day. And it's really because the parent or whomever just, it's an inconvenient, uncomfortable truth. They're not ready, for whatever reason, to deal with the reality. So you get programmed from childhood to not deal with reality by, oh, we're just going to forgive them. Oh, we're just going to rationalize and make excuses for the person because this is our poor coping mechanism. And for others of you, it can also be, a tool of manipulation in these families where, think about it. If you had a narcissist in your family, it was probably the narcissist who was the one who talked the most about forgiveness and would make you feel guilty if you don't forgive. And again, I've seen this, people, narcissists who never go to church, never read their Bible, suddenly got to go talk to the pastor about talking to so-and-so about forgiveness. Can you come over and talk to my child about forgiving? Because, this person is being unforgiving, and you'd be surprised on a daily basis. This person has nothing to do with morality, spirituality. But then suddenly when they need somebody to look the other way, well, let's go get the pastor involved. Let's get somebody, a moral authority, to put you under guilt and to, put scriptures, beat you down with the Bible about how you're not being a good Christian and you need to forgive. Well, let's talk about this, okay? Let's talk about what is forgiveness. And I'm even going to bring it up in the Christian concept. I know some of you watching don't come from that background. You're not living in that background. But I think that by discussing that along with other perspectives is going to help really give a full understanding of redefining forgiveness in a healthier context. I think most people don't have this understanding, and for that reason, they're not practicing real forgiveness. A lot of people, what they think forgiveness is kind of along the lines of, let's just forget this ever happened, or let's pretend this never happened, or can we just go back to the way things were before I got caught? Can we do that? That's what I think, a lot of people, when they're asking for forgiveness, and actually, if you pay attention, most people are not even asking. We get these people who, let's say there's a fallout, and they just call up and they act like nothing happened. Hey, how are you doing? Like, whoa, I haven't even talked to you in how many months? We had a major fallout, and you just want to roll back in like nothing ever happened. Or, they want to come in and be real sweet. Oh, sorry about that misunderstanding. Wow, who had a misunderstanding here? Was it you or me? Or I thought we were understanding each other pretty clear. Like, you did this and I don't agree with that, and there's nothing resolved. But really what they're asking in their forgiveness is, can we forget about this? Can we act like it never happened? Can we go back to the way it was before I got confronted on my behavior that I have no intention of changing? And I think this is why a lot of people have a hard time giving forgiveness, because they see forgiveness through this tone, and I think rightly so. I mean, if you're dealing with a lot of people who are fake apologizing, if that, then it's really hard to forgive people for something they're not truly sorry about, okay? I think what forgiveness should be in its rightful place is not about forgiving, but remembering. And I heard somebody say this recently. I can't remember his name, but I thought it was so spot on the way he said, forgiveness is not about forgiving, it's about remembering so that it doesn't happen again. You have to remember the wrongdoing, right, in order for it to not reoccur. And you have to remember the wrongdoing in order to set healthy boundaries so they don't get broken again, right? You got to know what the problem is to know what the solution is. A lot of times when people are not really sorry, they just want to hide it, if anything. They don't want to, put a spotlight on it and start redefining boundaries, because then they can't do what they want to do, They want to continue doing what they're doing a lot of times and hide it maybe at best, or just come up with another strategy to get what they want out of the situation without you getting butthurt, as they say, over it. So, and I think a lot of times when you really try to confront, let's say, a narcissist head on with behavior, a lot of times what I get, whether it's a narcissist or somebody demonstrating narcissistic characteristics, I'm not calling anybody a narcissist, right? I'm just saying if they're displaying narcissistic tendencies and you try to confront that person on an issue, a lot of times responses that I have gotten are, when they're not being nasty and gaslighting, they will say things like, well, I didn't mean to. And, well, that's in consideration. That's a lack of conscience, okay? And the empath might, in that situation, say, well, that's the problem. Next time, mean to, ... mean to be more considerate, mean to be more conscientious of other people, to be more considerate and grow a conscience, okay? Or, sometimes they'll play stupid. Oh, I didn't know. But that isn't really an excuse. That's the problem. That's precisely the problem. Not recognizing the fact that you didn't know is also the problem. So it's a failure to raise awareness to the needs of others and use ignorance as an excuse. Well, you didn't know. Maybe you should have. Maybe you should have asked. Maybe you should have considered that. Rather than, I didn't know, nobody didn't say anything, so, that type of thing. Sometimes even when narcissists are caught red-handed, they think that their intentions are going to save them. I didn't intend to do you harm. Well, I didn't mean to do that. I didn't know, right? They're going to use their intentions. Well, I had good intentions, and I'm sorry it came out that way. The lack of intent to not do harm is what the empath needs to shift the focus onto. So I feel like true forgiveness, right? If we're to redefine forgiveness, true forgiveness is going to be a call to action in breaking unhealthy patterns, not excusing them. And when we break these unhealthy patterns, that's going to result in more considerate and responsible behavior, right? But when you're stuck on, well, I didn't mean to, I didn't intend to, I didn't know, well, you are using your inconsideration and lack of conscience as an excuse. And it's important that the empath does not go along with validating that sort of thing. It's important that there is a call to action, to corrective action, so that unhealthy patterns of inconsideration, irresponsibility are broken. Now, if they can't or won't acknowledge and or change this bad behavior, then you're going to have to evaluate why you're in this relationship and if you need to leave. And, you're going to have to ask yourself, if staying in this relationship involves you repeatedly, perpetually forgiving this person, you have to acknowledge that you're not actually forgiving them. You are enabling them. And you're also failing to set and maintain healthy boundaries. So here's a question I think worth asking. Should you forgive somebody who's unrepentant? And this gets into the whole spirituality, morality question. A lot of Christians are told that, they're thrown scriptures that they need to forgive people, forgive. It's a broken record. There's even a verse about forgiving 70 times 7 times. That's how many times you need to forgive. But, that's just one scripture. And if you don't cherry pick scriptures like a lot of people do, if you actually study the Bible on the subject of forgiveness and repentance, as a whole, you look at all scriptures in the Bible and you consider all of them as a whole. What you do is you come away from this Bible study understanding that repentance is something, being sorry, repenting for something is valid when done in word and deed. And what does that mean in word and deed? It's like I not only confess that I was wrong, but I change my deeds. I walk away from the sin. I walk away from the bad behavior, or however you want to term it, okay? Walking away from it. I take action. Not just in my words, but in my deeds. And so if I'm telling you if you come from a Christian background like myself, and anybody is cherry picking scriptures and holding it over your head that you need to forgive them because God this and Christ that, and look at this scripture over here. Well, read the whole Bible, honey. Not the ones that suit you, okay? Look at the whole picture, and then I think they're going to stand corrected from that. And at bare minimum, regardless of whether or not you convert them to your way of believing, you need to give yourself some grace in not feeling obligated to forgive people who are not sorry. And their actions are clearly demonstrating it. The main takeaway that I want to give here is that you can't be indiscriminate in your forgiveness. It's a very highly valued gift, so you've got to be very selective and discerning about who you're giving it to, and make sure that you're giving it to someone who's really repentant. There's a Japanese proverb I heard somebody mention that forgiving the unrepentant is like drawing pictures in water. I thought that was brilliant. What does that mean? It's like basically, if there's no lasting change, then change is a mere illusion. And so before you actually give somebody your forgiveness, you got to ask yourself, is it enhancing the relationship, or is it enabling the negative qualities of the relationship? Is forgiving this person in the way that they're asking you to, right? Sometimes you can say, like, I forgive you, but I can't continue a relationship with you, right? These are boundaries, you know, but they want you to forgive them by continuing the relationship and just, you know, stop holding a grudge and let them get back to doing what they were doing. They don't want any changes to the relationship. They want you to make it go back to the way it was so that they can get back to what they were doing, right? You got to ask yourself, is doing that going to leave you vulnerable to further violation? Because if it is, you don't have proper boundaries here in this forgiveness. And you need to also ask yourself, what have they done apart from expressing feelings and words to regain your trust? There's got to be action to back up their feelings and words. And for how long? This is another thing. You know, what are their patterns? I told you 6 months. A narc can put up a good front. They can convince you that they are reformed, that they're a changed man or woman. And then within 6 months, the mask will fall off. They will relapse. And it's a pattern. What are the patterns with this person? What are their repeated relapses telling you about who they truly are, how they really feel at the end of the day, and what you can basically count on them doing, regardless of whatever they tell you? Pay attention to the patterns, because the patterns are what tell you the truth about this person. And it might even be a truth that they're in denial about within themselves. This is kind of the hard thing about some people who are liars. If you're dealing with, and a lot of narcissists are, they are pathological liars. Part of the reason why they're so convincing is because they believe their own lies. And so even though they might be very convincing to even themselves that they're going to change, the relapses are telling you the truth about this person, that maybe they want to change, maybe they think they're trying to change, but in the core of who they are, there's something that they're unwilling to let go of that is really standing in the way of long-term meaningful change. And they're maybe not even being honest with themselves about that. And therefore they can't be honest with anybody else. So, have they admitted what they've done and their motivations for doing it? I've had narcissists write me 4-page letters, and not once in the 4 pages did I ever hear any admission of wrongdoing. What I heard was guilt tripping about family, making excuses. Well, I was young and I didn't know any better. I didn't know it was going to turn out this way. I didn't mean to. I didn't think, oh, I got the bad advice. It was my therapist who led me astray. I mean, you know, blame shifting. But if you actually look through the 4 pages of written information, not once did I hear this person own their decisions and recognize their motivations for doing what they did. So again, you can get a lot of flowery, feel-good words, but look at the substance. Can they explain the wrongdoing without any prompting or coaching from you? And this is another way that empaths really get themselves into trouble with narcs. Narcs are very good at mirroring, and you start coaching them and telling them what you want to hear and what's important to you. They start mirroring that back and telling you what they know that you want to hear. They can be chameleons. They can shapeshift to become what you want them to become and say what they know you want to hear in order to get what they want out of the situation. And so you really need to not prompt or coach these people. And I know some of you, if you're empaths, you so want to heal and fix this. Unfortunately, if they really want to heal and fix it, they're not going to need you to coach them or prompt them. They're going to be going to get the self-help books. They're going to be going to therapists. They're going to be going on YouTube, watching videos like this, trying to figure out how to heal thyself, okay, so that they can heal their relationships. But apart from this actionable repentance, there's really no real repentance, okay? And without real repentance, there's not going to be any real change. You can't do it for them. You can't do it for them. It's not going to be real, okay? So if you're not selective about who you're giving your forgiveness to, I am sorry to say, being indiscriminate, an indiscriminate forgiver, a hyper forgiver, unfortunately, with a narcissist is going to really test your faith in humanity. Because what you're going to see is over and over and over again, no matter how much you self-sacrifice, no matter how much you lay yourself aside, you're going to keep getting violated by this person over and over and over again, wondering why. It's never enough. It's never good enough. And Spirit's going to let it happen, and I'll tell you why. Because you've got to learn a very valuable soul lesson, and that is to not be indiscriminate as a forgiver, and to become more giving in your, and more discerning in your giving of forgiveness. So let's talk about the role of forgiveness in healing, and I'm going to break it down into a 4-step process. For those of you particularly who have been haunted by an unreconciled past, haunted by unforgiven people in your past, and some of you even maybe at times dealing, even though you've put yourself apart from these people, you have emotional flashbacks involving them, maybe triggers, things that come up in your daily life from time to time that remind you of that person or that situation. It really has a hook in you. A lot of these people that could be giving you emotional flashbacks might be people who, yes, are not truly sorry. Not apart from getting caught, confronted, and dealt consequences. They're not sorry, and they never will be. And I've talked to you about that in my book, that unfortunately, empaths, a lot of times we misread a narcissist. We think that they're sorry. But when you get down to the nuts and bolts of it, you really peel back the layers of all of the emotional and mental manipulation that they're so good at, and you really look at the bare bones truth of it. You realize what they're sorry about, if anything, was that they got caught, they got confronted, they got dealt with, consequences, but they're not really truly sorry, and they never will be. You could also have emotional flashbacks involving people who are sorry. They really are, but you just can't bring yourself to forgive them because it's too much damage done at this point, and it can't be undone. Too many years, too many decades, too many losses. You can't repair that with this person. And there are people, in the self-help community who say, and even like New Age community, and dare I even say Christian community, people who do believe in this mind, body, spirit connection, they will say that bitterness and unresolved anger has a connection to diseases like cancer and arthritis. Yeah, there's actually Bible scriptures about that, believe it or not. So it's not just the New Agers, but even Christians. A lot of Christians who are well-read with the Bible know about that. And I definitely believe in a mind-body-spirit connection. So it is important to do the healing work, but, at what point? I mean, does that mean we let these people back in? Is that what forgiveness means? Forgiving someone who's unrepentant, right? There's been a really good quote going around for some time that forgiveness is not about letting people off the hook. It's about letting yourself off their hook, which I think is a great great line of advice. But how do you do that? How do you let yourself off of their hook if they're never going to change and too much damage has been done? And so step one of this 4-step process is grieving and sitting with the grief and feeling those feelings, okay? And I talk about that again in my book. I think it's like on, yeah, it's well, I'm gonna have to get my glasses here to show you. It's on page 123 of my book, and several pages thereafter, I talk about how you can work through those feelings. It's in chapter 5 of my book, okay? How you can sit with these feelings, and if you're stuck in this, like, I can't get out of this looping pattern with this person, I can't get on with my life, I can't get on with, the grief. You keep grieving, and then you think you recover, and then you grieve, and then you think you recover. Maybe you've not really fully grieved, okay? And I'm going to especially say this to those of you who came from the childhood programming that I talked about earlier, where you were not allowed to have certain feelings. You were not allowed to not forgive. You were not allowed to be angry and resentful. And, you had to be the bigger person. You had to forgive somebody who was not sorry. You had to look the other way, make excuses. You had to hyper attune to their needs and not be fully present with your emotional needs, okay? So this is going to be really hard for you to do if you've been taught to, hyper attune to other people's emotions and then tune out your own, like I said. You've got to learn how to aggressively grieve and be fully emotionally present to all of it, and some of it you might not have. It might be so normal to you that you become desensitized to something that you should not have been, and that's another reason why you have not grieved, okay? Because you don't even recognize this is something that was wrong. That you need to recognize and grieve. And so how long that it's going to take you is going to do this, to fully grieve, is going to be different for each person. But like I say in my book, it takes what it takes for as long as it takes for you to arrive at a mental place where you can honestly say, I'm not going to carry this anymore, and release it. Or, some of you, if you can't get to that place, maybe, and let's say you are a person of prayer, pray to God and say, I don't want to carry this anymore. I'm struggling. I can't bear this burden anymore. I don't want to bear this burden. Help me release this. And then you give it to God. But like I talk about in my book, this is not about intellectualizing the grief, like thinking and reasoning, which I've done a lot, okay, where you go back in your fourth in your mind, he said this and she said that, and then I did this, and then and well, what if I had done this, and what if they did that, No, this is about feeling, not thinking or reasoning. This is about feeling without suppressing or condemning, and letting those feelings flow through you, whether it's crying it out or journaling it out. Or I even, talked about in my book where I went through a time of intense grief, and I found that listening to dark wave music, goth wave music, I know it sounds a little bit crazy, but it really helped me to articulate and to tune into the feelings that I needed to synthesize, that I was trained in my upbringing to not. I didn't know how to synthesize. I did not know how to process those feelings. But finally, with listening to that kind of music, for me, might not be for you, might be something totally different, okay? But it was a way for me to tune in more. It assisted me in tuning in more to those dark, melancholy feelings that need to be processed and synthesized in order to fully release. I talk more about that in my book, though, for those of you who are interested in the grieving process. I mean, really grieving, like never before, purging it, intense purging, okay? Step 2, you've then got to decide the right course of action for your life. Again, if you're stuck and you're like, well, I did all the grieving, but I'm still stuck. It might be that you're in this looping pattern of fantasizing about taking action to right a wrong, but then you never do it, or you're sitting around trash talking them in your head or to friends and family to make yourself feel better. But this is really a poor, coping mechanism. And so some of you, maybe you need to ask yourself, do you need to do something? Should you do something? But you got to make up your mind. You got to be, don't let this go on without end. Is there a lawful way for you to get justice or resolution of something? For example, do you need to take them to court? Should you take them to court? Do you need to write them a letter and be, really strongly worded in your writing? Okay. Do you need to talk to others? Do you need to talk to other people and let them know what this person has done to warn them so that they can protect yourself? If there is something that you can do, then you should probably do it, okay, to right the wrong. Don't merely talk about it or fantasize about it, because then you get into this circular thinking where, you talk yourself into it, then you talk yourself out of it. You talk yourself into it and you talk yourself out of it, right? You're like, oh, I should have taken them to court when I had the chance. Yeah, but the statute of limitations ran out on them. But they deserve their ass thrown in jail for what they did. And then you see what I'm back and forth. And then what you're doing is, I don't mean to be crude in my language here, but it's what some would call mental masturbation. It's just nothing fruitful is really coming from it. Okay, you're just spinning your wheels, okay, for lack of better wording. And whatever action you wish to take in the situation, before you take it, maybe ask yourself, because sometimes we do get vengeful with people, right? That's a real human emotion. Even if all we do is just fantasize about it for a moment. We've got to ask ourselves, okay, what good is going to come from this? And the only good might be that you're warning other people to protect them so that it doesn't happen to other people, or maybe you are giving consequences to show the narc that their behavior, has consequences. It's just like everybody else. Like, a note to you, you're not special. You don't get exempted without end from the consequences in life. That might be the positive outcome of you taking action. But if ultimately you can't get, justice or restitution, if ultimately the damage cannot be undone, then unfortunately you may just have to accept that there's nothing you can do about it, and then, get on with life. Get on with it. And I think that most of you watching, if you've been dealing with a narcissist, it's probably because you're an empath. Narcissists love empaths, and empaths are narc magnets, right? So, but if you're an empath listening, I think you would agree with me when I say that most of us don't want to get back at people. We're not really seeking vengeance. But the problem is, which should be just as damaging, just as negative, is that we're trying to fix something that can't be fixed. We're trying to heal someone who does not truly want to be fixed. And accepting this fact, accepting this truth can really be one of the hardest things, because that means that you're going to have to accept the wounding that has occurred. You're going to have to accept the differences are not going to be reconciled. You're going to have to accept your losses and move on empty-handed. And often this is after having invested a lot. And that feeling of defeat on its own is a wound. I'm going to say it's also quite humbling as an empath to realize the limits of our own healing abilities, and the narc will definitely show us where our limits are. So step 3, we're going to have to practice radical acceptance, and this is about, cutting yourself from the need to fix them or the relationship, and releasing yourself from the fantasy that they're ever going to change, because this is what keeps us stuck. It's another thing that can keep us stuck is when we don't accept who this person is. Regardless of what they're saying and what they're feeling, their actions are telling you who they are, okay? And so when you get to a place where you can accept the truth about who they are, you've got to work on absolving yourself from any feelings of guilt, obligation, and punishment for not giving the narcissist an easy out in facing the consequences of their behavior. Especially, let's say if you're dealing with a covert narc who plays the poor me role. You know, they play that card, the poor me card, where, you know, can't you just look the other way? Why are you being so mean? Why are you holding a grudge? Again, you know, to not forgive the narc, aka just look the other way, let me get back to what I was doing, or pretend like I've changed until I earn your trust back, and then I'm going to relapse and violate you all over again, right? When you don't do that, when you don't play along with that anymore, then you're holding a grudge. You know, you're bitter, you're this, that, and the other, okay? Well, this is you no longer needing to explain or defend your decision. It's you no longer needing to look like the good guy to the narc or the other people around you, friends and family that they've convinced, that they've emotionally manipulated and mentally manipulated. To the narc, you know, consequences are going to feel like punishment to them. And boundaries that prevent further violation are going to feel like grudges to them. And they're going to put guilt feelings on you and whatnot. But like I said, you got to stop feeling like the bad guy for attuning to your emotional needs, not theirs, for a change. And stop feeling like a bad guy for letting them live with their choices, rather than helping them to escape the consequences of their choices. You've got to remember also that some of these people, some of these narcissists, they have the audacity to expect forgiveness out of people, to feel entitled to it, and they never even ask, okay? They never even ask for it. I mean, some of them, it's just, it's an unspoken thing, but of course you're going to forgive me. You always do. I mean, why shouldn't I be forgiven? Or they're just not even going to ask. And this will be over things that if the tables were turned, they'd seek vengeance for if it was done to them. And so, yet at the same time, if you don't seek vengeance, but you set healthy boundaries instead, they're going to accuse you of holding a grudge, which is basically, you know, gaslighting. So, let me say this, if practicing radical acceptance is hard, then you've got to honestly ask yourself, what are you getting out of this? Out of not accepting the truth about this person, about not setting healthy boundaries and maintaining, what are you getting out of this? What's the advantage of you holding on to this? And if there is one, is there a better advantage for you to let go? Think about that. And also, is there a disadvantage to you continuing to hold on that you need to recognize and acknowledge? Because sometimes what people are holding on to is really this victimhood narrative keeping you justified in a crappy life. And I gotta say that a lot of empaths who are in narcissistic relationships feel powerless, and they will, you know, blame staying in the relationship because, oh, I'm trapped, I'm powerless, I can't do anything. No, you know, I talk about that in my book as well. Like, how do you get your power back? Because you do have power. A lot of times the narcissist is being empowered by the empath, enabled by the empath. And you got to remember that as long as it's somebody else's fault, you're always going to be a victim. You're always going to be at their mercy. And the moment you start accepting responsibility, then you take your power back. But if you choose to keep enduring, maybe because you're married and you've got children involved, and that I understand, I've been through that storyline, I get it, no condemnation, right? But you've got to own it as your choice. If you're staying in a toxic marriage because of the children or whatever, then, again, don't play the poor me role. You've got to own it as your choice and be very clear. This is my choice for a time and for a reason. Own your choices, whether you stay or you go. Step 4, taking that power back. I mean, yes, if you honestly feel trapped, like you don't have any power in this situation, again, are you in a victim mentality that is giving you an excuse to not be responsible? Is it a convenient excuse that you're using? Is it that you really have no choices, or that you just don't like the choices that you have? And what if you continue to fail to make a choice? And things never change, and other people make choices for you that you'd rather they had not. You've got to consider this, what the cost of inaction is on your part. And if you honestly feel that you are at the mercy of the narcissist and they are more empowered than you, like I said, you've got to consider what you have personally done to strengthen their position while weakening your own. You've got to figure out how and why you gave your power away. And be compassionate with yourself, because it's like I say this in my book, you've got to remind yourself of the sense of power that you have of yourself. It was probably set during childhood. A lot of us, we came into marriages or relationships with a sense of powerlessness because it was programmed into us from childhood. And yes, in your childhood, you were in fact powerless. You were dependent, but you've got to have a conversation with yourself and say, you know what, I'm not a child anymore. I'm an adult now. And I don't have to be powerless anymore. I don't have to be a dependent. I don't have to be at the mercy of this individual anymore. Yes, being responsible and taking my power back is probably going to cost me. With freedom comes responsibility, and maybe the truth is I don't want to be responsible. I don't want to pay the cost for taking my power back. You got to own that. It is okay for you to feel powerless. Give yourself permission, again, to sit with those feelings, grieve them without, suppressing or judging those feelings. But the thing is, if you don't at some point acknowledge your own capacity for for power, and how you've given it away out of fear or insecurity or whatever, and if you don't take meaningful action to empower yourself for change, then how else are you ever going to empower yourself? So I want to encourage you, if what I've been saying here has really been resonating with you, you have got to stop waiting for the narc to empower you. They never will. That's not part of their program, okay? That's not how it works. They're never going to empower you. Stop waiting for the narc to rescue you. They never will. Again, not part of their program. Making you more secure is going to make them more insecure. And I explain that in the book. Why? What you've got to start doing instead is working on ways to empower and rescue yourself, and have the courage to grow up and take responsibility over your life choices, whether people, which is parents or your partner, like it or not, or they agree with it or not, or they understand it or not, right? I had to tell, even in my 30s, I had to tell a narcissist parent who was taking me to task, and I said, you know what? I don't need to explain this. I'm an adult. I pay my own bills. I run my own house. And this is what I've decided to do with my adult life, whether you understand it or not. And it was like, mic drop. Yes. Some of you are dealing, as adults, you're dealing with parents who have never acknowledged you as an adult, and they have never prepared or released you to be an adult. Therefore, you never have fully seen yourself as an adult. You can't wait around for them to do that for you. You've got to do it for yourself. Finally, I'm going to bring you to the punchline for those of you who made it this far. What does work with a narcissist? Well, realizing that forgiveness isn't just about you, and it isn't just about getting them to change. It's about changing your response to unchanged behavior. And It's also about you getting to see the bigger picture of forgiveness beyond yourself and that other person, right? Yeah, sometimes in terms of them, forgiving them and, letting them off the hook really isn't a loving decision for them, because they're not learning lessons in life. They're not, they're not dealing with the consequences of their choices. Other people, sometimes, not forgiving them, not letting yourself off of their hook isn't going to help your relationships with others who are healthy, right? Like, when you stay on this hook of being angry and embittered and whatnot about these people, then we keep ourselves locked up, unable to, get involved emotionally with people who aren't going to repeatedly violate you. So that is a cause for letting yourself off the narc's hook, but not letting them off the hook for what they did. And I'm going to tell you a personal story in closing about this. As an empath, some might call me codependent, dealing with narcissists in the family and in marriage for decades, people, decades, 20, 40 years, okay? And finally, after 20, 40 years, coming to the shocking revelation that nothing I did ever changed their behavior. It was the same broken record over and over again. We were having the same conversations, the same arguments, the same disagreements. At least every 6 months, whenever the mask fell off. And, so I had to come to this realization that this entire time I thought I was helping them, but what I was actually doing was hurting them. Every time I forgave them, I looked the other way. The perpetual forgiveness and ignoring of reoccurring slights, and the mercy and the grace, I'm not gonna hold you accountable. I'm gonna come in and fix this for you, even though you broke it. You know what I'm saying? This actually harmed these individuals. And in my own self-healing work, I had to realize that I actually cheated them out of their life's lessons. I trained them to believe that they were special and they were exempt from consequences that other people are not. I demotivated them from making any meaningful change. I validated their belief that their way works because, it did. Violate, apologize, repeat. Violate, apologize, repeat. Violate, apologize, repeat. And this went on for 20, 40 years with no end in sight until finally I said enough apologies so that I get no more violations. Some of you are waiting around for a miracle. You're waiting for the right words or some magical advice to make them change so that you can live happily ever after. You're looking for a silver bullet solution brought in by a savior. You're looking for hugs, rainbows, happily ever after. But the truth is that this is a fantasy that keeps you stuck, feeling trapped in life. You're hanging on to the fantasy because you're unwilling to make the tough choices. How do I know? Guilty as charged, right? And so it's easier in the moment to hang on to hope that eventually they're going to empathize with you and eventually they're going to put in the hard work. It's easier to hope for this and hang on than to work on facing the truth about who they are, what their repeated choices are, and then responding to that truth in a way that honors your best interests as much as theirs. Along with the understanding that what's in your best interest and theirs may be that you don't reconcile because your differences are unchanged and therefore irreconcilable. I hope that this has helped you. I know it's been a hard pill to swallow because I had to swallow it myself. And so, I'm going to be talking more, in the future about getting healthy relationships, which I think is often through recognizing very early on when we meet people where the irreconcilable differences are, and being honest with ourselves and cutting ourselves off from these kind of unions sooner than later, because ultimately relationships do not last over the long term when there are, core values that are not in alignment. And so I will be putting out more videos on that. And in the meantime, if you want to, learn more about healthy relationships, check out my Ageless, Timeless playlist. And I have, more videos about that on there. And I will be adding more in the future. If you want to make sure you're getting notified whenever I post new videos, like I said, make sure you've hit the subscribe button and you've activated the bell. And also check out my book if you're interested in reading and you want to get the fuller picture. It's available now on Audible, Amazon, and Kindle. Thanks again for your support. Till next time, be blessed.